Lab 3. Question 1. There's a surplus because when the price is above the equilibrium price, the quantity demanded is less than the quantity supply. When the price is above the equilibrium, the self-interest will tend to push the price down because the producer will reduce the price in order to sell his goods, and the competition between other producers will also reduce the price in general. Question 3. Part A, the sum producer and consumer surplus would be $5. If the trade takes place at $4, then the producer surplus would be $1 and the consumer surplus would be $4. When the trade takes place at $7, the producer surplus is $4 and the consumer surplus is $1. As you can see, in either case, the total adds up to $5. Question 4. When demand increases, the equilibrium price and quantity increase, as you can see on the graph. When the supply increases, the equilibrium price decreases and the equilibrium quantity increases. When supply decreases, the equilibrium quantity decreases and the equilibrium price will increase. Part D. When demand decreases, both the equilibrium quantity and price decrease. Question 5. When China and India become richer, higher percentage of the population have the ability to buy cars and automobiles. Therefore, there's an increase in demand for oil. As a result, increases the prices. Question 6. This is the supply and demand curve plotted based on the data given. As you can see, the equilibrium price is at $2 and the equilibrium quantity is 35 units of bread. Question 7. There is a shortage of apartments because the quantity demanded is greater than quantity supplied at price 1,000, as you can see on the graph. Therefore, the prices of the apartments will increase to 1,100 because the sellers have a higher incentive to increase their prices and the buyers are willing to pay higher prices.
So for question 8, determine the equilibrium quantity and price without drawing a graph. So as you can see at this, you can see that based off supply and quantity demanded, you can see that as supply increases, demand decreases, and they are at a point of equilibrium right here, 150, 150. You can do this by looking at the price of the good and just visually thinking of if supply is rising and demand is decreasing, where are the two going to meet at a point where it's equal, and also the quantity supply and the quantity demanded are equal right here, thus equilibrium. Question 9. As you can see off this graph, the question is asking about selling it at a price of $20, which consumers are demanding, or selling at a price of $20, which consumers are demanding 40 instead of 20, which suppliers are supplying. And then a buyer's willingness to pay for when the quantity is 20 pounds, consumers are willing to pay $45, which is way more than the suppliers need, which is $20. So there's a lot of unsatisfied wants on this line. And then over here, there's a lot of unsatisfied wants for the supplier. So if they could meet in the middle at a quantity of 30, that would be a lot better. So sellers are willing to supply 20 pounds of sugar at the price of $20. However, at this price, consumers are demanding 40 pounds of sugar. So there's a lot of unequal gains right here. When the quantity is 20 pounds, buyers are willing to pay $45. So this combination is not in equilibrium because there are unexploited gains. So there are things that the sellers aren't getting that they're paying too much for, and then at the other quantity of 20 pounds, consumers are having to settle for unsatisfied wants. Question 10. If the price of margarine decreases, what happens to the demand of butter? So this is asking, like the next question you'll see in question 11, what will happen to the equilibrium if there's a shift in supply or demand? So right here, we're seeing a shift in demand because the substitute for butter is making the demand for butter decrease, because as the price of a substitute decreases, the demand decreases. So as you can see by the dotted line, which is the demand curve, it shifts down, so the equilibrium, the price goes down, but so does the quantity. So that's how that would happen. If butter and margarine were not substitutes, then the decrease in margin would not really have that much of an effect on butter. They would essentially not really be related. And question 11. So this is a diagram for the sugar market, and the two parts of the question were what would happen to the equilibrium quantity if wages of sugarcane harvesters increased, and then what if a new study was published that emphasized the negative health effects of consuming sugar. So both of these influences are going to affect the demand curve. So the first one will influence income of sugarcane harvesters, and the second part will influence the tastes of the general public. So with this shift on the left, as the income rises, more workers are spending more money. Thus, the equilibrium point of equilibrium will shift up and to the right. So there'll be more quantity, but goods will also be at a higher price. In the shift on the right, as quantity fall, so the equilibrium quantity and price would decrease as the demand curve shifted left. So this would be in response to public opinion. Less people would start to eat sugar. So quantity would go down and price would go down. So the equilibrium point would shift down and left, as in the graph. So both of these lines are the shifting of the demand curve. And as you can see, there would be a different equilibrium point.
So question 12 asks, if a snowstorm was forecast for the next day, what would happen to the demand for snow shovels? Is this a change in quantity demanded or a change in demand? And would this cause a change in quantity supplied or a change in supply? So the demand for snow shovels would increase, and it's a change in demand and not quantity demanded because more people are buying snow shovels. If only the price were to increase, that would be a change in quantity demanded. But since more people are out buying snow shovels, it's a change in demand. And this would cause a change in quantity supplied. So question 13 asks, in recent years, the paleo diet, which emphasizes fewer grains, has become popular. So what do you suppose that did to the price and quantity of bread? So since the demand for bread has decreased, that shifts the demand curve down and to the left as seen in the graph. And this decreases both the quantity and the price of the bread because a decrease in demand causes sellers to lower their prices because consumers are less willing to pay high prices for the product. And since this product is no longer as profitable, sellers will produce a lower quantity of it. Question 14 asks to calculate the change in consumer surplus and the change in producer surplus caused by technological advances. And it asks, are buyers better or worse off, and are sellers better or worse off? So to calculate the change in consumer surplus, that is the area of the graph that is below the demand curve and above the price. And since we don't have all this information in the graph, what I did was take the area of the trapezoid, which is between the two prices, so, because that would be equivalent to subtracting the area of one triangle from the other triangle. And I got $9.45. So the change in producer surplus is the area above the supply curve and below the price. So we actually had the numbers for that. So I subtracted the area of the triangle from the old supply from the new supply and got $1.65. So buyers are better off because the consumer surplus increases, and sellers are also better off because the producer surplus also increases. For question 15, it asks to analyze how the combined effect of changes in demand and supply, how they affect price and quantity. So I filled out this chart where it shows that an increase in demand will always increase the price and increase the quantity. Meanwhile, a decrease in demand will decrease both. On the other hand, an increase in supply will decrease the price and increase the quantity, and a decrease in supply will increase the price and decrease the quantity. So when looking at the combined effect of these two factors, when they both increase the price, we know that the price will increase. And this happens when demand increases and supply decreases. And when demand decreases and supply increases, they both decrease the price, so we know that the combined effect is decreasing the price. And this goes for the quantity as well. When both demand and supply increase, we know the quantity increases. And when both demand and supply decrease, we know that the quantity decreases. However, when the demand increases and the supply increases, we do not know the effect on the price because they have opposite effects. So we don't know what the combined effect would be. And this goes as well for an increase in demand and decrease in supply. For the quantity, we wouldn't know the effect. And we wouldn't know the effect for the quantity either if the demand is decreased and the supply is increased. And if we have both if we both have a decrease in demand and decrease in supply, then we do not know the combined effect on price.
16A, the circumstances that have led up to the situation were a decrease in the supply of rock salt and an overall increase in the demand due to a lot of snowstorms. So based on this, you can see that there is going to be a slight or sizable actually increase in the equilibrium price and a slight decrease in the equilibrium quantity. In 16B, with smartphones, there is a great increase in the demand for smartphones as the technology becomes more readily available, and a slight increase in the supply. So because of this, you get this large increase in the equilibrium quantity and this slight increase in equilibrium price. In 16C, with canned tomatoes, there's an increase in the supply of canned tomatoes, but due to press, there was a decrease in overall demand for canned tomatoes. So what you get is this decrease overall by a bit in equilibrium price and a slight increase in equilibrium quantity. In 17C, with Part A, dangerous cars are considered a substitute for safer cars, as they're both cars and you usually get one vehicle, and dangerous cars are at a cheaper price point than safer cars. In B, with an increase in the research, there would be an increase in the supply of safe cars, which would lead to the equilibrium price of safer cars decreasing, and also the equilibrium quantity of safe cars increasing. And with C, a lower price in safer cars would lead to a decrease in demand for dangerous cars. And D, in a free market, as engineers and scientists discover new ways to make safer cars, the number of dangerous cars sold will tend to decrease. With 18, prices ration themselves by increasing to the max that people are willing to pay for the good when the good becomes scarce in a competitive market. With 19, when businesses make work more fun or create incentives to work there, the demand for that job will increase. And with that demand usually comes a decrease in the equilibrium price or wage for that job. So in doing so, usually there comes a cost at making a job more fun. So companies will try to do it as cheaply as they possibly can, which is an example with the median radio or television announcer only making $14.88 an hour because it's a very safe job, which means that there's a lot of high incentive for it, but the way that they make it more affordable is with the incentives of that attention, the potential fame that you get from that exposure.